Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place that meets new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're enjoying the conversation here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or somebody you know would like to come on and have a chat with me, feel free to reach out to me on basically every social media platform that exists. And the best ways you can find which one is the best for you is isaacl.dev. That's the place to find me. I'm excited for this one. This one's gonna be spicy and it's gonna be entertaining. And let's just get started. So my guest today is Maddy Montaquila. Maddy, do you want to say hello? Introduce yourself.
Hello. Spicy. Me? Never.
No, never, not one bit.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, I'm Maddy. Hi, everybody. PM on the .NET team at Microsoft. I was on Maui, Xamarin / Maui for 6 years, and now I'm over in Aspireland, have been for the last year or so. And Queen of Chaos, coordinator of chaos, whatever you want to call me. I love to heckle Isaac whenever I see him.
Oh man. Yeah. Oh man. Always a good time. We're gonna talk about a lot of things. We'll talk about one thing. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I've talked to you a lot, but we've never actually talked in depth for an hour straight. It's always like, hey, we're gonna talk for 15 minutes at a conference, or see you somewhere randomly, right? And so I'm looking forward to actually a real conversation with you where you can't run away because you're getting distracted by something else. Let's start here. Tell me how it got started for you. When did you realize that technology was the thing for you?
Oh my God. Let's see. When I was the late 90s, when I was a toddler, a little bit older, I got my first computer and I used it to play Barbie Fashion Show, which was the best video game of all time.
Sure.
Also a variety of other ones, including Flight Simulator was on there, Age of Empires, all those things. But I used to think I was the coolest person in the entire world when you plug in the disc, you pull the disc in, and then the DirectX install window would pop up and everything would turn blue and it would
yeah.
And I thought that was hacking. I was truly, I am the coolest. And yeah, just growing up, I always computers were cool, but I didn't really for a long time. Both my parents were realtors. Neither of them went to college, so computers, I didn't realize it was a job that people did. I don't know why I didn't think that, but I was like, oh yes, I will be a doctor. I don't know. Yeah. That's what people say.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I don't not very similar background, but my parents don't know anything about technology, right? Yeah. So, when I told them it's this computer thing is the only thing I really care about. And they're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So my mom totally thinks it's IT still. But I'm well, okay.
I've said this joke 1,000 times. My dad, whenever I talk to my dad, he's like, you still building websites? I'm like, sure.
Sort of, yeah.
It's not worth the unraveling of you ask me on a certain day, I have no idea what I'm doing. But anyway.
Yeah.
Here's a fun question for you. When did you realize there's good money in tech?
Oh, well, probably in college.
Yeah.
In high school, I still was kind of oh, I'll do engineering. I'll go build chips. I thought I was going to go work at AMD and build processors. And because I still didn't grok what software was.
Yeah.
I installed and deleted about 1 million viruses off my bulky laptop at that point. So I kind of knew my way around and operated them, but I was that's it's IT. Those programs just magically, I don't know where my brain was, but but it was probably my first year in college when half of the people I was in class with were well, yeah, I'm going to go work at Microsoft. I'm going to go work at Google. I'm going to go work here because I'm going to get paid a lot. And I was
sure.
I just want to get paid at all. That would be cool.
Yeah. No, that it's very funny. And now that, and I don't want to age you, but you've been in tech long enough where it's
oh yeah,
the idea of oh, maybe maybe when I'm older, maybe I'll do something different or whatever. And it's but I can't not leave tech salaries because that's
exactly.
yeah. So you mentioned that you kind of the hardware piece. Is it because that you you had a better understanding because it's physical and you can see it versus with software you're sure, there's electricity running around and that's making things show up on the screen? Was that kind of the big thing?
Yeah, it was very tangible, and my mom was very much, she could not operate a phone to save her life, but she could take apart a car and put it back together. And I'm not
Yeah.
that good, but the first thing I like did on my own that I thought was cool was one of my friends had a side gig taking apart Xbox controllers and putting in different color LEDs on the ring. So
Sure.
your controller would be purple instead of green. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's so cool. So that was like, I got a soldering iron and I changed the LEDs and I was like, I'm amazing.
Yeah.
And that was very, like tangible.
Yeah.
Just, oh, I can do this thing, and if I do it right, it turns on, and if I don't, it's not on, and then I fix it.
Yeah, no, the like the tinkering thing is always something that, you know, I've been doing this show long enough that there's a pretty solid thread for most of the people that have been on the show and most people in technology that I see. It's like just naturally curious people, and that always equated to I took apart a VCR when I was a kid, or, you know, I always breaking remote control cars and putting them back together, or like something around that. And then that correlates now to, like, you know, adults have like hobbies like Raspberry Pis or, you know, 3D printing or whatever, right? Because exactly. Exactly.
I have a new project, so it's come out of retirement.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, I have like 5 of them, and I just look around and I'm like, oh, I know there's one over there. I know there's one over there. I think it's on. I think it's plugged in, maybe. It's but, you know, when you become an adult, you can afford like stupid toys. And like
exactly.
I'm like, and what I've noticed is that people in tech love stupid toys. So I know that I know I'm a little bit older than you, but like, was MySpace like a really big thing when you were like in your late teens, early 20s?
It would have been my early teens, MySpace.
Yeah.
So I was still generally on like the decent side of the internet by then. Like my cousins had MySpace pages that I was obsessed with, but my mom wouldn't let me have my own.
Yeah.
I do distinctly, I was very much in like the AIM era though, like the chat rooms and chat messages. And I remember running like my first 100-foot Ethernet cable through my entire house. We didn't have Wi-Fi. So I ran it through, like, I unplugged our like router or whatever it was that was plugging into the home computer, and I DI'd my laptop as the only thing into the modem. Like, I unplugged the phone, I unplugged everything so I could chat with my friends. And my mom was like, I'm gonna effing kill you. Didn't swear yet. I'm doing good.
No, swears are fine. No, it's funny because like I can date somebody like when they started or like how old they are, like if they say like MySpace or not, because there was this point in time with MySpace, and anybody who's like a geriatric millennial like I am will say, oh yeah, like MySpace page, like being able to crash the browser with like horrible CSS and JavaScript, like that was the thing. And like that kind of opened up, like, at least for my generation of technology, I think like Web 2.0, and then later came, social media kind of took it, like, it wasn't as much the social media part as like like I can do crazy things with a website.
We had Tumblr, like when I was mid high school.
Tumblr. I was a bit, I think Tumblr was a bit like before me. Like, it's funny because like when you're a kid and you'll see like kids that are a couple years younger than you that are liking like certain like kid shows. Like I'm too old for Barney, but I remember kids like 2 years younger than me being really into Barney, and I was like, I don't get it. Or like I was a Power Rangers kid, and I remember like, and the kids that are older than me were like, Power Rangers, what? Like this is silliness. So like, it like 1 or 2 years can like completely change like your view on things. And like for the Tumblr MySpace thing, I honestly, like, I don't know what Tumblr is. I never used Tumblr. I never went on Tumblr. I just heard about it. I'm like, okay, so it's like blogging. And somebody's like, no, it's not blogging. I'm like, it sounds like blogging though.
It's MySpace 2.0. I mean, like, you could have your page, and I mean, it was less structured. Like, your page could just be whatever you want.
Yeah.
But you didn't have like the top friends thing and all the stuff that made MySpace fun. But you could go in and edit the HTML. And I remember thinking I was the coolest person ever because I'd like make the header bigger and I'd be like, hack.
I remember when I was in college, there was the seniors did like a senior project where they built something interesting, and most of them were kind of cool applications. But one team, they took like web forms, and I don't know how that web forms in JavaScript, and they built like a completely modular social network. So like your page was consisted of blocks, and you could just move stuff in your blocks. So you can put custom content inside these blocks and move them and arrange and design your page whichever way you wanted. And I thought that was so cool. And I remember that the professor was just trashing them. Like, nobody wants something like this, like whatever. And like the thing that the professors actually liked was basically some guy basically built like Uber, but like it wasn't Uber. Like it was before Uber was like a thing. And the teacher was like, oh, that's a genius idea. But I just thought it was funny because I'm like, oh, like I could definitely see value in like the creativity that enables somebody to like move their content around on a website, because WYSIWYG, like editors like Squarespace, and that wasn't a thing yet.
Right. I was going to say, like, WordPress is this entire business.
Yes, exactly. But for whatever reason, this professor didn't get it. Oh, well.
Naturally.
Yeah. So you're in school, you're taking these, were you doing, did you do like the proper computer science, like software engineering route? Or did you?
Computer engineering.
Yeah, sure. What does that mean? Computer engineering.
So I was in like circuits classes and like algorithms classes, but everything was in C and C++.
Sure.
Like we weren't doing bubble sort. We were doing like, okay, use C++ to move the arm on a robot, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then slowly as I started to realize more like, that hardware, you need to get a PhD to be useful anymore. And I was not going to school for that long. Like there's just no way. But also that I kind of liked software stuff. Like I thought it was cool. I did more of the like general things, but most of my classes were like the fundamentals of networking or fundamentals of like cloud computing and like how the cloud
build an ATM. Was that a project that you did when you did C? Like that was like the project that I was like, this is the silliest thing. Like, why am I having to program ATM? Like, and then I thought like, oh, it's a kind of a simple process. Like, even though it's thousands of dollars in this little box, right?
Yeah. My favorite one was they made us optimize a Sudoku solver. And I could not, I hated it. I was like, this is the biggest loadable. And then once it works, you're like,
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's an interesting point. So like you've been in tech long enough to know like we try to live off of like when things work, because when things don't work is way more, right? Like the ratio of like things not working versus things working. When did you realize in tech that it's like, oh man, I'm going to fail a ton doing this stuff?
Oh, I was so stubborn about it. I did not have, there were a lot of kids in my classes who like had been doing, like they had CS classes in high school or they, knew what they wanted to do, or they tinkered around with coding. And so they were obviously had way more of an affinity for it than I did. And so I just thought I was dumb and I was just fighting to keep up with everybody. And then at some point I realized, I was like, oh, no, nothing ever works. This is just trial and error. And I'm great at trial and error. Like I have no issues with that. It took me a long time to connect it though in the software world. Cause it's so easy to get frustrated.
Yeah. Did you relate more in like when you're taking these classes and you're getting these assignments or whatever, did you resonate more with like I'm doing something like the algorithm piece of it? Or were you more interested in like I'm trying to solve a problem? Because I think there's kind of two camps in people that are in technology. It's like, oh, I like the math, or I like the science, and I like the sophistication of it. Or it's like, oh, I like the idea that I can like, I use this point all the time. We're like tricking sand to be intelligent, right? And we're solving some problem with sand, right?
Yeah. I hate theoretical things. I don't hate theoretical things. I think they're very cool. My brain does not work well like that. And so when it was like, okay, optimize this bubble sort to be n whatever, I was like, I literally do not care. But if it was like, how many like, how many bubbles can you put in this box in the next hour? And I'd be like, that's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
like the old Google questions where it's like, how many manholes
how many manhole covers or
where it's like, okay, let me actually think about it for a second. Oh, that's a very stupid question to ask somebody like when they're trying to interview for a job at a tech company, but okay, fine. So once you get your first job in tech, did you think pretty quick, like, was it what you expected, or was it like, oh, like this is not what I was taught at all, I kind of have to figure everything out like as an adult?
Yeah, so spoiler alert, I'm a PM. So I am notably not a software engineer full time. Um, so my first internship, well, I did like a summer thing before college where I used Arduino stuff for the first time ever, and I was like, cool, robot. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
oh
sure.
my god, a button. But it wasn't until my first real internship in Microsoft, which we did this thing called the Garage program, which has
Hmm.
been
Yeah.
totally canceled, but it was the best. Um, and my project was with, at the time it was Visual Studio Team Server. So it wasn't even Azure DevOps yet. That's how old you know I am. But it was not TFS anymore. So
Sure.
that's how you can really pinpoint where
Yeah.
my age of intern
Like
was.
we're what age are you? Are you Team Foundation server? Are you Visual Studio Online? Are you whatever was after that? What
Yeah.
are you Azure DevOps, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so Slack was just like gaining
Sure,
popularity. And
sure.
so our first project was to build a Slack bot that said, like, hey, there's a PR ready for review. And I hated it. I was like, this sucks. Like JavaScript sucks. We were using TypeScript. I couldn't hated all of the, well, you have to write a test that makes sure that when it does it, like the methodicalness of it, is that a word?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like it was just, it drove me nuts. And I was like, I want to make the message be like 12 colors. I want it to be able to do this when I click on it. I want it to do all this cool stuff. And they're like, good software engineering practices. And I was like, I don't think I can sit still for this long. And so I totally convinced myself that it was because it was just software and not hardware. And I went back and I did an Amazon Robotics internship, also in software. And that was like Java and device.
Yeah.
And I hated that too. Like I was like, solving problems was fun, but I liked to solve a couple problems and then go discover more problems more
Yeah.
than I liked solving them.
Sure.
I was much better at finding issues than I was at fixing them.
Mm.
So
Sounds like a PM.
around that time,
Oh,
yeah,
no, I'm just kidding.
exactly. No,
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah.
So my intern manager at Microsoft, one of them who's a sweetheart, like that first internship, he was like, "Do you want to try PM?" And I was like, "I'm not a failed engineer, absolutely not." And he was like, okay. And sure enough, he brought me up to what it actually means to be a PM, which is not just to sit there and like read survey results, but
Yeah.
to break things and
Oh, sure.
get angry.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
for what's worth, and we'll talk about like what you're doing these days in a bit. But I think the team that you're on, like I've said this 1,000 times, like every one of those people that are in that job could probably be a dev if they care about it, right? I not to say
Yeah.
that like all PMs like have that level of technical expertise. Like some are better than others in certain areas, but that team particularly is always been very fascinating to me, just because of the fact that it's like you're all super technical.
Yeah.
So
And like the perfect median for me, because I still
yeah.
get to feel like I use all this time and effort and energy I put into like becoming a good software engineer,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have to do it 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
It's part of my job, not all of my job.
Yeah, no, I mean that, and I imagine that's it helps you probably with the like, and I don't want to say that you have ADHD, but like, there's definitely
I do.
there's definitely like the I can't spend too much time on one task, or I just get irritated because of reasons.
Yep.
So so your first job out of school. Was your first job out of school at Microsoft, or was it at, I don't know, like I don't remember if you worked at Xamarin and then when you came over when Xamarin got acquired, I don't remember exactly, but
No. So my first job was at Microsoft.
Okay.
My last summer before college, Xamarin got acquired.
Yeah. Okay.
And moved into our office, and I met a bunch of them. And Microsoft recruiting said, if you want to work for Microsoft, you have to move to Seattle. And I said, okay, that sucks.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, if you find a team that will hire you in Boston, hypothetically, you could get hired there. So I like marched my little butt around to everybody, and I went to the Xamarin team. I was like, do you guys need a PM? And they were like, actually, and I had worked with them on one of the intern projects, and they were like, you do kind of know your way around like some of the legal stuff we were doing for one of the intern projects. And they were like, it might be nice to have someone who knows how the Microsoft machine works a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I joined I guess I joined full time because by the time I graduated and everything, it was probably like a year and a half after Xamarin got acquired, maybe 2.
Okay.
So I was very much not in the OG Xamarin
Sure,
acquisition, but the
sure.
team was still pretty
But you knew them
not
all.
isolated. Yeah, they all
Yeah.
still worked together. Like a bunch of them were still in Boston.
Yeah.
That's where it was central to. And
Yep.
I sat next to Miguel and with Joseph and everyone in the office for 3 years before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And the team was still pretty intact at that
Yeah.
point. So I felt like I was in like this little startup inside of Microsoft, which felt very cool.
Yeah, I wish I'd imagined too. And I mean, for what it's worth, like, gave you an opportunity to work on some very interesting stuff very, very quickly. Because I think, a lot of people, their first job is, you're doing like, I'll just say you're doing stuff you probably no one else wants to do. You're doing stuff that doesn't have a lot of impact, and you happen to be at a place where, for what it's worth, like Xamarin at the time and now its predecessor, like it's a big swath of like the developer landscape, especially building on the Microsoft platform. So I want to ask this question specifically about like that time, like Xamarin, and we could talk a little bit about Maui too as a part of that, but like, how familiar were you with like you talked about you did some JavaScript and some TypeScript development and stuff, but like how familiar with like building for platforms before you started like like your real job working at, on the Xamarin team?
Yeah, my experience with .NET in particular was I had built a UWP app to try and hack something together for my senior project, just because I knew I was going to the team and I should probably learn .NET.
Yeah.
And the summer before, one of the intern projects was UWP, but I was the PM for it. So I used the designer, but that was it. The only other like mobile stuff I had done was I made some math thing run on an Android phone using C and some bunch of things. Okay. So I had the video right when it came out when it was still in Canary. And I was like, yeah, I'm a mobile developer. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was also not all, but very much Linux, Vim. I mean, VS Code wasn't out yet, so like Sublime was my jam. I had not opened an IDE in a long time. And so when I like started and they gave me a MacBook at Microsoft and then they said, open this thing called VS for Mac. I was like,
what is this? Yeah.
Completely mind boggled. It was just the biggest, like, who hired me? This is not, I thought you were going to give me a Windows machine and I was going to be able to just like,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's very shocking to me to this day that people still have this, mid 90s representation of Microsoft, knowing that there's tons of people that don't even have Windows devices and they work there. So here's another interesting question, specifically to like when you're in college and like you're navigating like the technological landscape in college, like how much is open source talked about, like at least in your experience at the university level? Is it like, hey, there's this thing, or is it as you're trying to find solutions to like the projects you're given, you're finding stuff? Because at that point in time, like GitHub is kind of a thing. There's other sources out there, like NPM is a thing, NuGet's a thing, right?
Yeah. Really not much. Version control we talked about, right? Like I was the person that the only thing that I was better at than everybody else was Git. Because in my mind, it's just a bunch of branches that need to be organized. And so my brain was like, click, click. So like version control wise and syncing things up and having a repository and that repository being available to the public, those were all concepts I was familiar with, but and comfortable with. But the culture of open source wasn't at all. There were sometimes like, oh yeah, if you go look on the project's GitHub, you can usually find an issue, but otherwise just look at Stack Overflow. And it's like, okay, yeah. It wasn't until I started at Xamarin and I realized how much energy they were pouring into the open source community, especially with it being freshly open sourced only a couple years prior, that there was this machine there that needed to be nurtured. And it was, I was totally unprepared for it.
Yeah, I want to talk about like since your day mostly is probably all out in the open, at least for the most part. Like, so I have this weird thought about like how, like, obviously there's tons of pros in open source, but I think it's been well established there's lots of cons in it, not just from an area of like, oh, people are using software and they don't really care about it, but it's like the expectations that people put on open source, especially from like a visibility standpoint, where it's like, oh, like this thing is here, this thing's going to be here forever, I'm going to trust this thing. Like people put a lot of blind faith in open source. I'd like to ask you, and we'll transition into kind of what you're doing now. Like, how is it safe for people to put just a ton of faith in open source, even if it's from a large company, or people should be doing the work themselves to kind of make decisions, right? I guess it's like, do you lead by example or do you lead by choice?
Yeah. Can I answer with an anecdote?
Of course you can. Of course you
can. So Xamarin to Maui migration, we broke all of the NuGet packages. The basis changed, right?
Sure. Yep.
Which means that if you were using a Xamarin Forms package in .NET 5, that was the exact same thing as what would be in Maui. The maintainer still had to go in, change the namespaces, and rebuild the package for .NET Core instead of standard, right? And we had people calling us saying, well, our entire business is built on this package that hasn't been touched in 7 years.
Yeah.
And we're like, what do you want us to do?
Yeah.
Like, and so some packages, like I think FMage like was really popular, and the maintainer was, I can't remember if it was that one. I don't want to talk negatively. Everyone's busy. The other thing with open source is like everyone has a life. So I have no fault or blame on anyone who, takes time off of their projects. But like we did the work to upgrade a couple. But most of them we were like, bro, you're the one who are relying on a rotten piece of technology. Like it's like the architecture of your house. Like if you've got mold in the walls and you let it fester and then you have to knock down a wall because the mold is taken over, that's kind of your fault. But if the project is alive and well and there's not mold in your walls, then leave it. Like I think that's great. But I do believe that open source becomes the responsibility of the person consuming it, how much of a risk they want to take on it. And things change, people have kids or move or career changes or like, economic instability or whatever it is. So you have to be willing to roll with those punches. But the nice thing about open source is, especially if you're a big company and you're going to come to me and tell me that your $1 billion business is completely staked on something, you can just fork it. Yeah. You can fork it and maintain it. If you have to do that, you have to do it. And so, I walk the line a little bit. Like, I think generally for me, for my stuff, like I'm all about open source. If I start to find myself having a keystone on one open source library or package, that's when I start to think, all right, I really should make sure that if something were to happen to this, like my business doesn't collapse.
Sure.
It's easy to say being Microsoft because our teams are all very scrappy these days, but like we have the resources hypothetically to be like, well, we'll just call the TypeScript team up and tell them to fix it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think one thing too, and this is kind of a double-edged question, but like, so you work in the tooling space, right? And I think that, and one, I want to ask you a question about like, why have you been interested in tooling? Like you could have opportunities to find other avenues to work in any company, right? But what is it about like building things for developers that has kind of resonated with you?
So many things. One is that like I felt all the pain.
Yeah.
And I can see the pain, and it frustrates me to no end watching people feel the pain. And when you use something, like when I go and I try a new technology, and the experience is just amazing, like it sticks with me. And I always love trying to replicate that. And so I know we'll get back into what I'm working on later, but with Aspire, it was weird for me because it's technically platform. It's technically a platform that is for, cloud distributed application. It's a builder pattern. But to me, Aspire has always been tooling. Because the app host is something that runs all your stuff and connects it all together, and you have things and your tools, and it makes your life easier. And so I was really worried when I came over to the team. I was like, I'm not going to design APIs. Who the hell do you think I am? And they're like, no. It's tooling, but it's not. And And I think it goes back to probably that whole tangible thing, is that with tooling, I can click the buttons in the IDE and see what I'm doing get easier or harder, God forbid. When it's platform, I have to go and find someone who is using the code and how they're actually instrumenting it, and to see if, namespace, global namespaces, or top level namespaces, or global usings, or all these things are catching on. Like, I can use them, but I can't tell if I just like them because I'm used to them or I designed them. As opposed to tooling, like, it feels very apparent when something sucks. Like, it's a
Yeah.
sharp pain.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that kind of leads me into the second part of the question, where it's like, as tooling relates to open source, because one thing that I've always found fascinating, especially and I'm just going to a little bit of inside of Microsoft, like all of the stuff like that you see, like tooling stuff, like none of it really makes money, right?
Right.
Like, yes, there are things like Visual Studio subscriptions that makes money. There's attaching into Azure, which makes money, but like .NET doesn't make money by itself. Aspire doesn't make money by itself. So traditionally, like a lot of it ends up becoming open source because you can get a lot of free work from it, right? So I want to ask you about that specifically, like working in the tooling space and how it relates to like getting external contributors into it, and how you kind of manage that dichotomy.
Yeah, that's a good question. Tooling is interesting too, because for a while, we were pretty strictly like, the platform's open, the tooling is closed, right? And the tooling is the proprietary part. And that's definitely slipped up in recent years. I think we're a little bit looser on both sides of that coin, which is good for everybody, right? But in terms of tooling maintenance and contributions, the biggest difficulty that I have is when the tooling and the platform teams don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
Because people will contribute valuable things to the platform from open source, and it will not have a way to be highlighted in tooling, or tooling will break because of it. This happened on Maui all the time as we were like starting to really build things out. Just high reload suddenly busted. Oh, someone added this XAML extension method. Oh,
Sure.
no, like what? And that coordination has always been really difficult. From the tooling side, like as a control freak, I like owning the experience, right? So if it's fixing a bug, if it's like, oh, this thing doesn't work and now it does work, I'm more comfortable with it. But when it comes to the user experience, when even now, like people will come in and like contribute whole new things, and I'm like, I want to work with them through it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's not so much like, oh, I don't like what you did, but it's more like, if someone is talking to me as they're designing it, and we can talk through the experience of the tooling together, then I'll be much happier with it. But that's a lot harder to do with open source.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was having a conversation with somebody who maintains a very large open source project, and he was saying, I don't even know, like, it's very strange, like taking contribution for somebody that you don't know anything about them. You don't know their name. You don't know what their face looks like. You don't know where they live, nothing, right? Because some of these GitHub accounts, they're so like bare intentionally, because people want to have their kind of their anonymity, but it's crazy. And I always loved it when, you would do like thanks for the open source contributions, like John on like the ASP.NET community stand-up would do something, and it's like they would like thank like some really weird, like because they contributed something wild, like to the compiler or something. And I'm just like, it's like that to me is like kind of the beauty of open source, is this anonymity. But like I'd imagine as somebody who's trying to manage work, you see tons of issues, see tons of PRs, and a very, very small fraction of them are like things that you can actually work on because they provide all the information. And like there's also the political thing where, oh, I can't say the wrong thing here because everything that I write on this public forum is going to get posted by, Hacker News or whatever, right?
Seriously, yeah. I'm not good. They don't put me in the contentious threads because they know I'm just going to be like, what are we doing here? What's going on? Everyone shut up.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that's why I really appreciate you, because, and I'll say this in the nicest way possible, you don't take yourself seriously.
Thank you.
And I don't think, and because of that, you don't take a lot of things that you work on very seriously, in the fact that like, we're not doing anything that's going to, put a person. I mean, we're not putting people into space, and that like you probably are. There are probably some things that like my point
I'm
is
sure
that
there are.
my point is that like it's nothing that's going to negatively affect something if like, oh, there's a bug here.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And yes, like there are some examples where it's like, oh, I lost $1 million. It's like, okay, well, that's a bummer, but it's $1 million and you could probably make it back. So
yeah, and enterprises do run on .NET, and I think there are times where I'd have to turn on the seriousness a little bit. But for my levity, I was actually just talking to David Fowler and Damien Edwards about this last week. It's like one of my friends who lives one town over teaches special needs fourth graders who are English as a second language.
Yeah.
And and going back to comp, she makes no money.
Yeah.
Every year she has 30 kids whose entire formative year is in her hands. And I just sit here and I just argue with people on Twitter. Like, there's so much less seriousness in my life, and so that helps me stay grounded. But
I'm 100% there. My wife is a paraeducator, like so she so she has a slew of kids that need extra help in the classrooms that she's responsible for, and she'll tell me about her day, and I'm just like, I couldn't handle like 2 hours of that. Like,
no.
And it's like every single day. And, I think there are certain people that are just wired differently. I guess I don't have enough empathy to be around kids, whatever. That's my problem.
I think I have too much. I think I would be like a disaster. Like, I think I would make it about an hour and then I'd be like, I need to solve everybody's problems right now.
That's a thing too.
You need a good middle line.
Yeah, I guess. Or you just need to be so hyper aware of where your blind spots are that you just kind of turn yourself off, which I don't know if people with a lot of empathy can turn off. I know the people that I know in my life that have too much empathy. I'm just like, man, could you just go like 10 minutes without caring about everybody else? And it's like, it's not a thing. It's not a thing.
No, but it makes it very easy to care less about like people on the internet saying stupid things with completely uneducated opinions.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I can't be mad. I had a couple of coworkers like check in on me after a YouTube video a couple months ago because some of the comments are stupid. And they were like, are you okay? And I was like, I screenshot these. I send these to my friends in the group chat. And I'm like, can you imagine being an adult human being with every resource in the world at your fingertips and sitting on a YouTube video and writing something like that? That is hilarious.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, like, and I'm like, no, the love, the care is so elsewhere. It's just so elsewhere, The
ultimate superpower, I think, and it's one that I don't have, unfortunately, is literally not giving a fuck about what people think. And I'm of the, whatever reason, I care way too much about what people think, which is a personality problem that I would love to just disappear. Right.
Yeah. You'd solve a lot of people's issues if you figured out how to do that.
Do I owe you like the money for the therapy session now, or do I pay you? All right. Anyway. So let's
talk about my insurance.
Perfect. One of the things that first off, I'll just say this. I've been a huge fan of a lot of the things that you've been doing ever since I first met you and I first saw what you were doing. I rightfully so, like I played around with Maui when I had no reason to, because like, oh, like Maddy likes it, so I must like it too. Like there has to be some reason why Maddy likes this, right? So then when I found out that you were moving over to Aspire, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want. Because I've told you this in private. I'll say it in public as well. Like I think that you bring like I don't know exactly what it is, but you bring something to the table that I think is severely missing in tech. Like, one of the things that I'd love to ask you about is like why. Like, I imagine you were given the option, or maybe you weren't given the option. I don't know. Like, what was the decision to move on from Maui, where you were kind of the face of Maui. You were going everywhere, doing everything. You and David are like the face of Maui. And you decided to like, okay, well, I'm going to transition to go from like building apps for client devices and phones and whatever to like this whole like behemoth distributed system framework thing. Like, what was some of your thought process when that opportunity was presented to you?
There was a lot of wine involved among the whole journey, but it was probably sometime in March last year. Is it
like a red wine, like a wine that you gotta take a nap afterwards? Or?
Yeah, it's something. It has to taste like cardboard. The more cardboardy it tastes, the happier I am. So there was a lot of that, and I kind of like, I don't know, I grew up in Maui, right? I
Sure.
started in Xamarin, and I worked on the first hot reload we had, and then I did this whole unification thing, and then we did the whole rebrand, and it was a disaster for a little bit, and then it actually turned out really well in the end, and I like was so proud of it, right? Um, but once the dust started to settle in Maui, especially after .NET 8 shipped, and people were like, "Oh, this you guys figured it out, not bad." And we were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, cool." Like the numbers are all going in the right direction, and tooling was no, tooling is never complete. You can always
No,
find more
no,
things to
never.
build, but um, I had become more senior in my role, and it came to the point where it was like, okay, we don't need Dave and Maddie, right? When Maddie was doing her little things here and there, and then like, you know, helping Dave, that was great. But now there's two PMs.
Yeah.
We don't have enough tooling work to occupy an entire Maddie.
Sure.
And I was getting restless, and it was definitely noticeable. But I didn't want to leave Maui.
Yeah.
I talked to my manager at MVP Summit a couple years ago, and my skip manager, and he was like, "Well, would you go somewhere else in .NET? Like, we want to give you something so you can get the next promotion and impact and blah
Sure.
blah blah
Sure.
corporate
Sure.
work."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, "No, like you can take me off of Maui over my dead
Create some
body."
other framework that's mobile based that I'll work on. Right.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
even then it was like I was married to the community and the brand,
Ah, sure.
and
Yeah.
I was like, no, I know everybody and I love everybody. And we sit on the community stand-ups and we tell these like stupid inside jokes to like 500 of our closest friends. Like these, I don't want to give that up. I'm comfortable. And then once those words came out of my mouth where I was like, I'm comfortable, I was like,
Oh no. Yeah.
that's how you
Yeah.
know you have
Yeah.
to move.
Yeah.
And so he asked me, you know, if there was anything on .NET you'd work on, or .NET and Visual Studio at that point, what would you work on? And I was like, Aspire. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
And he was like, why? And I was like, because I don't understand it. And I think the way they talk about it is stupid. Like purely rage based. Like I was like,
Yeah.
I listened to them talk about this in this all hand, like Damien did this whole demo, and I was like, you guys are just saying words. You're just saying words.
Yeah.
This thing looks really cool. Like I'm sure if I got it, I would be really excited about this. But I have no idea what you're saying. So rage based interest.
Yeah. And I will say they're like the going back to the statement a bit earlier about like not really caring what other people think, like to say like this doesn't make sense to me. To me, like I'm not trying to, you know, pump the ego of David Fowler or Damian Edwards, but it's like they've done a few things, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, I don't get this, like this is dumb, what are you doing, to like those two specifically is kind of funny. Like,
oh yeah, it was like a big like slap the mic on the table and kind of be like,
yeah.
And I mean, it was a couple months of me like asking around and getting different answers from different people, and you know, just kind of just forming this opinion on my own, and then eventually just being like,
yeah.
But they're great. They embrace the chaos, which I don't think I would have been able to say something like that if I didn't know that about them. But yeah, I definitely was like, these two are idiots. And then everyone's like, you are probably the idiot in this situation, but I see where you're coming from.
Well, I mean, so let's be real. Idiot has different definitions at different times, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I think that there's, from an intellectual standpoint, there's like the idea of idiot, but then there's also, it's like, there's the village idiot who might be a savant, but nobody knows because they're just stumbling through life. But I will say this, like, I think that having somebody with an outside perspective is really, really good, right? And I think that's in the grand scheme of things, you know, no knock on Fowler or Damien, but it's, you know, you built the thing. You came up with the idea in your head. Maybe having somebody come in and say like, hey, this doesn't make sense to me who hasn't built it is very valuable, right? Like, and I think that's, in general, that's what I've always kind of defined as like what makes a really good PM. Because you can come in there from the outside perspective and say, are we doing as good as we can? Like, and I think that's what I think is really great. And we can talk about Aspire a little bit. Like, I think that most people that are watching this have heard of it. Do you want to give like 30 seconds on what Aspire is and what it means to .NET people? Because you have to, because it's your job.
That's true. The best explanation is imagine cloning any repo and hitting F5 and everything works.
Yeah.
That's Aspire. It's Docker Compose on crack with types and IntelliSense. but it's also, you know, a set of the packages that help you bootstrap everything and turn everything on, and we give you some like reasonable opinion defaults that you can easily comment out or if out or whatever it is. And then the deployment story is kind of the thing that we're working on now, getting things into the cloud by declaring it in C#
Yeah.
instead of passing it over the fence to your DevOps team and just
Hmm.
praying they understand what your app is supposed to do, and
Yeah.
all that negotiation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I mean, a year ago, I, half of that stuff that I just said wouldn't mean anything to me.
Oh, sure.
Or I'd know the words, like I know what Docker Compose is, but I hadn't felt the pain
Yeah.
that way yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although
I've
mobile
always,
backends suck too, so I guess I had felt a little bit of the
yeah,
pain.
yeah. I mean, it's like a different kind of thing, right? And you're also, when you start to like bleed into other disciplines is when like the pain is really bad, right? Like if I'm a mobile developer and I'm building a Swift app or I'm building an Android app, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got to worry about backend and like
Yeah.
that's hard. Or even, like the canonical, like I'm a front end developer, so I use CSS, HTML, and whatever JavaScript framework is hot at the moment. I got to call an API. Oh, how do I do that? Like, who do I
Mm-hmm.
talk to? You got to work with them to coordinate like what the return signatures are and what the method signatures are. That stuff is not fun.
No.
And one of the things, so I've, at least how I've described Aspire, and I think I even pitched this to you when I stole your slide deck months ago. Like I don't see Aspire about building apps. It's about building solutions, because when you build something, like you're never just building an app and then you're done.
Right.
You're building a database, you're building some caching, you're building file system, whatever it is, right? And like it's all of those external dependencies that are always the problem.
Yep.
And wouldn't it be great if you could just have all of that stuff in one place and it runs on your machine, and then you can coordinate to the works in other in clouds or whatever. So like it's a solution. And I remember I think I think it was in Frog. I did a talk on Aspire. And some guy walked up to me and he said basically like I didn't even know Aspire was for like databases or whatever. He's like, because the demos that I see are always like front end, back end cache or whatever, right? Because they're like the hello world sort of examples, right? And like the example that I had like a SQL Server hosted in Linux, and it had a migration service built into it. Like it was more thought out. And he said, once I heard the word solution, I got it. And I'm like, well, good. That's kind of the point. But I think one of the things that I love specifically about Aspire, and you're a part of it, James Newton King is a part of it. You folks are pumping so much stuff out into the community saying, hey, look at this, please give us feedback on it. Is that something that is kind of being driven by just general like Microsoft developer division leadership, or is that like, hey, we want this thing to basically be built by the community and we're just the kind of the controlling arms for it?
Yeah, we have definitely pushed the envelope on what I think Microsoft, what DevDiv would traditionally expect in terms of open source engagement, right? Like we are breaking rules left and right, and not rules, but just we're putting things in the repo and we're opening issues about features that we aren't even committed to shipping. Like we're instead of doing planning and then like publishing the planning, we're just like, I think this is what we're gonna do next. Yeah, thumbs up. All right, cool. And so yeah, and just how open we are, and like James, tweeting things out the week before, it's so good. James Newton King's Blue Sky and Twitter post on the dashboard thing. So I think I learned a lot of it from Maui, actually, and I brought some of that energy in because Maui had to, and Xamarin too. Xamarin had a really good community, but Xamarin brought this rabid community into Maui and folded it into kind of like proper .NET.
Yeah.
And I realized there was some energy there that, since so much of .NET is enterprise and closed source and all this, that like there wasn't as much momentum as I was used to with Maui. And so like the community toolkit of the Aspire integrations is a great example. Everyone was like, why would you do that? Like that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, people want to contribute code and they want it to show up when you right click add package. Like, so all of these things just bubbled up. I wouldn't say we're doing anything like particularly innovative. We're really questioning if something should be happening in a meeting versus or if we need to write something up nicely before we stick it on GitHub, more like that. Obviously a lot of the like sausage making stuff is going to happen in meetings, and oh yeah, so we need to get this release chopped by this date, and to do that blah blah blah. But like, hey Mitch, I don't like that the CLI has the health status next to the thing. Let's move it. We just do it in GitHub.
Yeah.
And we coordinate on Teams. And as far for like asking for feedback and stuff, I think with something like Aspire, you have to, because we have plenty of big internal .NET customers at Microsoft.
Yeah.
We have some smaller internal .NET customers, but when you work at Microsoft, you have systems in place that alleviate some of the common pains, and then you have other pains that you have because of those systems that other people don't have.
Yeah.
And so we need people who do this every day to call out the pain points that do and do not resonate, so we can actually attack them. And then you get into things like deployment, and it's like, well, we do this random thing with Terraform.
Oh, sure.
And yeah. And so we need that. Otherwise we would just be building something for ourselves, which is not useful.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I really appreciate too is when I first saw like the early prototypes of it, and then when it eventually kind of became more public, my immediate response was, how are they going to message this to make people understand that it's for everybody? Versus, because I think the initial messaging was a little bit like, in order to use this, you have to be in the cloud. In order to use this, you have to be using Docker already, and like all these sort of things, right? Yeah. And I love that you folks have changed kind of the messaging around it to like, hey, you have an app. Doesn't matter if it's .NET, doesn't matter if it's Python, doesn't matter if it's JavaScript, doesn't matter if it's whatever, like just use Aspire to put all the pieces together. Because that's something, like I said a bit earlier, like I've always struggled when you build an app and you have to like connect all of the tissue to like just make it work. Like, and I think that's the big thing. And I think one thing that I really appreciate is that you folks are very, very open to like, oh, if somebody was, enough people say that's not a good idea, you kind of pivot, or you reframe or what have you, instead of just like marching along like, oh, these are what we plan on doing and we're going to do it. And if you have issues, like maybe we'll address them in .NET 11 or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's hard because, shipping this frequently and having so many signals coming in, and our engineering teams all have other priorities, right? Like there isn't like 5 people who only work on Aspire. Even Fowler works on, and Damien both work on other things. Damien's .NET Run single file thing has blown up on the internet in the last few days. I'm so excited. A
little bit.
He told me he hasn't decided if he's going to do it for the Aspire app host yet, and I almost wrung his neck. So he has to do it or I'm going to lose it. But tangent aside, it's not even like, Aspire is my main job, but I have other responsibilities and general .NET stuff, right? General Microsoft stuff. And so dealing with the like fake urgency we've put behind Aspire, which it's not fake because the industry moves fast and we have to move fast or we're not going to catch on. But compared to someone who's also working on like, okay, well, I'm working on .NET 10 Preview 3 right now, right? So tell me why I have to do this thing for Aspire in the next 2 weeks when I'm working on something that's going to ship in November right now. And it's like this really weird thing. And so being open and like hearing from people, I think helps, because then everyone who works on Aspire, and as much as we just say it's like Fowler and Damien, it's more than just Fowler and Damien. But they also, what I've had to do is really turn that signal and like pump it in to make people understand why they should fix this bug in 2 weeks. Like this is important now. And we have a really good team. Like we're slowly getting everyone more sucked into the feedback channels, and that's important. And I a lot of people are like, well, what PM is supposed to do is listen to the feedback and distill it for the team. No. The PM is supposed to channel the feedback to the team in whatever way makes sense. If it's distilling it, that's great. But in this case, like we need to be zero distance to customers because everything is so complicated. Like they don't need the telephoned Maddy version of someone. When I talk to you for an hour about your app, I'm going to hear something completely different than what Fowler is going to hear.
Oh, sure.
Just because of who we are. Yeah.
Yeah. And also like there's this whole thing where it's distillation is great, but distillation is a synonym of the word filter. which
Right.
can have a very bad connotation, right?
Right.
So like think about it like this: why would we want to filter out feedback?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's feedback that's not worthy, feedback that we don't have time for, feedback from a competitor. Like it's one of those things where you can't take all of the feedback in because it's just a fire hose, but there needs to be some concerted effort to kind of balance of like what's, constructive feedback versus what's positive feedback versus like, melancholy feedback where it's like people don't know what they want, but like they heard of it and they're like, oh, maybe we should use it, but like, is it too much work and whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah. One of the coolest things about being a DevTools PM too, to sort of bring it full circle, is that in any like traditional PM learning type, cause I'll read the books or I'll Google things especially when I was starting to interview and stuff, I did like, what is a PM, blah, blah, blah. And so much of it is about finding and getting and listening to the feedback.
Sure.
Because in a consumer world, the only people who give you feedback are other friggin' PMs or people who are pissed.
Yeah.
Right? In DevTools, that is not the case. Like we are inundated. Like it is truly the fire hose, like you said.
Yeah.
We constantly are hearing whether it's Blue Sky or Discord or GitHub or Visual Studio issues or an account rep emails us or some guy whom I met at a conference sends me an email, right? Like the stream never ends. So yeah, there's definitely an art, not a science to filtering, but not I don't know, filtering, but not filtering, right?
Yeah, don't letting things fall through the cracks, right? Like,
right.
I mean,
Or when you do, which is going to happen, at least acknowledge.
Yeah.
We're not going to get to this right now. Like dashboard extensibility in Aspire comes up all the time. Everyone wants to add their own tech to the dashboard. I'm like, cool. Yeah, I do too. That'd be awesome. Keep the feedback over there. I will go pick that stream up when I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's also healthy to be able to push back too, because I think there's a lot of folks that in the world that instead of saying we'll get back to that or we don't see the value there at this time, but we definitely see the value in the future, there's some people that just ignore it, right? Yeah. And I think ignoring all that really does is just cause complacency, which is not good. I mean,
there are definitely times where it seems like we're ignoring things too.
Well, it's just too much.
Because it's just too much.
Yeah.
But we are listening. We try to listen.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's pretty.
People know how to get in touch with you, right? So you can always send their feedback to me.
I mean, I think I've done that, but it's one of those things where also, a lot of people, they think they might have like some epiphany or some like brilliant thing, and it's like, oh, did you look at this other issue? Like, because I think too, like as a community member, like you have to also do your due diligence. It's like, has this question been asked 4,000 times before?
Right.
Or has this feature request been asked before?
Right.
Because let's face it, like GitHub is great, but GitHub isn't like the best at surfacing things. Like the search on GitHub sometimes is challenging. It's getting better. But it's one of those things too, where I'm waiting for the day that like GitHub, like as you enter an issue, it does like that Stack Overflow thing where it's like, hey, these are issues that already exist. Because that's going to happen eventually.
So nice.
That's going to happen eventually,
so nice.
Right? Like that's just one of those things where like it's bound to happen. Yeah. Like the technology probably already exists.
I mean, that seems like a great use for AI, right? Like
that's what I figured.
AI.
It'd be a Copilot thing. Like issues powered by Copilot. Whatever.
Right.
I'm doing like marketing job for them or engineering a product job at GitHub for them.
Oh yeah, of course you are.
This has been awesome. I just looked at the clock and I'm like, oh man, it's 11:58. So as we wrap up, I'd like to kind of outside of Aspire, I think that there's lots of trends in technology right now that are quite interesting, and I'd like to get as somebody who is trying to pay attention to these things, whether it's for your own personal growth, for growth to make Aspire better, whatever, right? Like, how are you consuming content these days, and what are some of the ways that you don't pay attention to things? Because I think that's a question that I love to ask people. It's like, how are you paying attention these days?
Yeah. Oh my God, that is a really good question. I kind of haphazardly. Like
Yeah.
it helps that I'm plugged in general to the memes and the Twitters and everything. Like I think
Sure.
that helps. Um, and when it comes to the product, like I stay in touch, I kind of keep an eye on like what's going on around that world. But everything else really just happens organically. I've never been a newsletter person. I really
Mm,
wish I was, but
yeah.
I cannot commit to doing something every day. I don't know what's wrong with me. Um, I have started to actually have to like segregate work from life info
Mm,
sources because of like the negative information. Like I created a separate Reddit account a couple years ago because I just could not see people talk about Maui in my regular Reddit feed anymore. I was like
sure.
I just can't do it. It makes me
Yeah.
so mad.
Yeah.
And like I obviously want to go fix everything. I'm not mad at the people, but
Yeah.
and so now I have a couple different like okay, like Blue Sky I really only use for like tech and work stuff. Occasionally I'll throw out a tweet complaining about the Patriots, like nothing crazy.
Sure.
But I try to keep things regularly separate. Um it's hard, but also I like to talk to people and ask what they're working on, and going to conferences really helps me because you'll go to a conference and someone will be like, well, why don't you guys do something about this? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then you go down the rabbit hole that night and you're like, oh, that's cool. Like now I've learned about this whole new thing because you'll go to a conference and about this. I'm like, I have no, and then you go to, oh, that's cool. Just, I don't know. I'm open to listening. If anyone has a way to be organized
Yeah.
and learn, that'd be great. But a newsletter doesn't work. So I need
Yeah.
someone to like just inject it into my brain involuntarily.
Yeah. I've tried 1,000 different things. I've tried like bookmarking, but then I have like
Mm,
4,000 bookmarks. I'm like, oh, do I really? I looked at a bookmark the other day and I'm like, do I really look at this bookmark from 3 weeks ago? It's probably not real anymore. And
yeah,
then
yeah.
I
Like,
get
what did I even think
super
about that?
analysis paralysis, and I just okay, whatever. Um,
Yep.
one of the things too that I would like to hear is like, where do you see kind of the future of technology going? I think things are going super fast. Like, it feels like we're on hyperdrive. AI is taking over all of our kind of our sentient paying attention to things. But like, what do you think is like, you know, if you're to give somebody advice getting into tech, what would you tell them to do?
Question. Be curious. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah.
I think everyone's panicking that AI is going to take their jobs right now. I think what's really going to happen is junior developers are going to be able to do what senior developers are doing now, and the senior developers are going to have to adapt or retire. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
freaking out about AI replacing you instead of learning when and when not to use it, the same way that we had to learn when and when not to use Stack Overflow, right? Like, that's important. Don't just vibe code your way and throw shit in the repo and call it a day, because it's not thorough. But also, you have to kind of embrace what's happening
Yeah.
without letting it completely panic you, and also without being stubborn and ignoring it.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty stubborn. I have tried to ignore AI for as long as I possibly could because I'm like, I don't need this. I don't need this. I'm good at what I do. I don't need this. Which,
Yeah.
once I got over myself and I started to realize, like, oh, certain things that this does, like recapping Teams meetings for me, right? Like, that is an actual benefit I am getting. And now it is freeing me up to do other things that I like to do with my time.
Yeah.
And it's just a new version of, oh, there's Google now. Oh, there's Stack Overflow. Oh, like there's IntelliSense, right? It's just the new one of that. And so for people coming into software as a career, like, don't be afraid. Ask questions. Critically think about things. Do not just accept things. People say the wrong thing all the time. Fowler says stupid things all the time, and he's one of the smartest people on this planet. So, like, it's okay to be curious and
Yeah.
wrong and not get it. But don't just be wrong and dig your heels in. That's never going to work.
No, I completely agree. Maddie, this conversation has been awesome. One, it's great to just hear you talk about things you care about, and also a little bit, learn a little bit more about your backstory and all that sort of stuff was awesome too. For folks that aren't following Maddie, I assume you are. If you know who I am, you probably know who she is. One way is you can follow her on Blue Sky. There'll be other links in the bottom to to find more, but Maddy Montaquila, so MADDYMONTAQUIAUILA.net. I'll
Nice.
look down below. Good Lord. I'm
Yeah.
reading it and I can't even read it right.
There's a lot of vowels in there. It's not your fault.
No. It's not you. It's me. It's 100% me. But there'll be some links to the show notes down below to find some other places. Before we sign off, my friend, do you have any parting words?
No, thanks. This was fun. It was nice to chat with you. I'll see you when I see you.
Yeah,
And
you as well.
Yeah, keep doing your thing.
We're
lucky to have you around the community.
I will try. So. Thank you. And thank you for the folks that were tuning in live and the folks who are listening to the future. This is Isaac Levin. This has been Copy and Open Source. And for my friend Maddy, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.